You hear me?
Yes,
Marina? Jason Flores just asked me to let him in. He's trying to get in.
Jason is our superintendent of public works, so absolutely let him in. Oh, I'm sorry. Jason Flores is Costa
It's
Associates.
Costa's associate, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Got the
Yeah.
Jasons confused for a moment.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody going?
Hi, Jason.
Well, Jason, and yourself?
Good evening.
I'm doing well.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
I only be able to speak for the first part. I will get to a computer as quickly as possible.
Marina, that's acceptable that former Councilman Gaudier, who's be sworn in tonight, will have to be off camera for a little while or not? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, that's fine.
Oh, I apologize, Chris. I do this all the time. I'm so used to running the meeting. That was not a question to me. That was a question to you. I apologize.
It's okay. Somebody's got to drive the bus.
Yeah, but you don't need four hands on the wheel.
Yeah.
You already have a quorum.
Okay, that's good.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Steve.
Happy and healthy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Marina,
Yes.
it is fine for me to be part of this meeting tonight, correct?
That's up to Rob. If he said it was okay, then it's fine.
The conversation that we had was that it might be a conflict since, he is within the 200 foot of the current application. So we were not sure. So, we left at the description of in this case will be you.
I mean, it's not my conflict, so if Rob said it was okay, then that's fine.
All right. So you know what? Let me make a phone call and I will
Marina,
get back. Yes.
hold on a second. So Rob is a resident of River Edge, and that's the conflict. Does that conflict extend to his company is I think what Jason's asking. If so, Jason can't be present. It's not Rob's call. It's your call as the attorney to determine whether Costa Associates are in conflict, must recuse themselves, or just Rob Costa, the principal.
Okay, I'll talk to, I can give Rob a call now. Is he available, Jason?
He should be available.
Okay.
We can get him a call. So
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second then.
Welcome, Mr. Salva.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Good, George. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Good to
Happy
see
New
you,
Year.
George.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone else who's here.
I have a
Happy New
question for
Year.
Chris Paslin. Did you go to Regis?
I did.
So did I. 90.
All right.
I don't know if I look familiar to you at all. It's been a while.
Oh, good to have you on board.
Yeah, no, same here, man. Hope all is well.
Likewise.
One of my best friends went to Regis, Dennis Ryan. You guys know?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah.
Must have
Depends on the year, I
graduated in like
guess.
98 or 99.
Yeah.
Oh, way younger than me.
Yeah.
All right.
We won't disclose age in this call.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just trying to work out one administrative matter and we'll get started. I think we've got everyone here at this point. So just give our council a moment to.
All right, sorry about that. Rob is gonna jump on in a minute, and I think he'll talk to Jason too. So,
Okay. Well, we can get started because.
Yeah.
He's, we're having appointment of professionals anyway, so he could be here for that part certainly. So why don't we get things going since we've got everybody here? Lisa, how are you? You all set?
I'm good. Yep, I'm ready.
All right, let's call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge. Today is Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. It is now 7:32 p.m. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge is being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to Borough Council chambers unavailability. It is in compliance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act and associated regulations. Notice of this remote meeting was published in the Bergen Record, posted on the front doors of Borough Hall, and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial-in and login information necessary for public participation and access to this meeting remotely. A copy of the agenda for this meeting was made available on the borough's website near the posting of the meeting notice and included the dial-in and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand button on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. The board will address you by name or by the last 4 digits of your telephone number. You may mute and unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon on Zoom or dialing *6 on your telephone keypad. You must state your name and address prior to making a public comment. And just for purposes of seeing, let's call the roll. Ms. Steinle.
all right, thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Here,
Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Ms. Boland is excused tonight. Mr. Cray,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Knigo,
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Here.
Mr. Gautier. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Oops, sorry, you're on mute.
Here.
All right, and Councilman Glass,
Here.
and then Mr. Salva.
Sorry, I was unmuting. Yes, present. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Also present, we have our zoning officer, Mr. Depkin, and our borough engineer or board engineer's office, Jason Flores.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back. Hope everyone had good holidays and a good New Year. One item of housekeeping this evening as we get started. We're going to have a 9:30 curfew this evening. Our first item on the agenda for the evening is under the approval of minutes. We have a draft set of minutes for our meeting on the 11th of December, 2024. Draft of the minutes was circulated to the board prior to this evening's meeting for review. I open it to the board for comments and or questions on those minutes. Silence being golden, I will look for a motion on the minutes, please.
Move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Cray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Canio. Ms. Steinle, I think we have some folks who are not eligible to vote on the minutes.
Yes, Mr. Gibbons, Mr. Pfeffer, and then our 2 new members cannot vote, but everyone else can participate in the voice vote.
Okay, so with those exceptions noted, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Our next agenda item this evening, we'll move down under memorializations. The applicant is Nicholas Ariema. The property is 428 Elm Avenue, Block 811, Lot 16. Resolution granting relief for various setback encroachments. The draft of the resolution was circulated prior to this evening's meeting for the board's review and comment. Open it to the board for comments and or questions on the draft resolution. There being none, I will look for a motion on the resolution, please.
Move to accept the resolution as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Cray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kenigo.
All right, thank you. And I'll only call those eligible to vote. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Mr. Cray,
Yes.
Mr. Kenigo,
Yes.
and Councilman Glass.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving along, we come to the reorganization of the Land Use Board. The first item this evening is the election of officers. Open it to the board for nomination of chair.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend Chris Caslin yourself for chair.
Second.
You're gonna do it to me again, huh, guys?
Doing a great job.
Anyone else want to throw their hat in? Wow, don't everybody jump at once. Come on. Okay. With that, so we have a motion from the mayor and a second from the councilman. Ms. Steinley, do we do
I think in the past we've done
A
voice
voice?
votes.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Thank you all and happy to be back, I think, in the driver's seat. The next position on the board for vice chair, open it to the board for nominations. You know, there are big shoes to fill in, Mr. Merman, but I know we've got,
I'll nominate Mr. Cray.
so Ms. Kenigo has put a nomination for Mr. Cray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Pfeffer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
I'm considering it.
Did anyone ask Mr. Cray?
He didn't
think I'll
say
just-
no.
I think you just found out.
Yeah, I'm still considering my vote here.
Well, welcome, Mr. Cray. We look forward to driving things together with you. Our last position on the board this evening is for board secretary. Are there any nominations?
How about Mr. Gibbons?
We have a motion from Mr. Kenigo for Mr. Gibbons. There's a second.
Second.
Second from Councilman Glass. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain?
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gibbons, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, next items under our reorganization this evening, appointment of professionals to our board. First position, professional this evening is for board attorney. I believe we have, Mr. Mayor.
So, my motion would be for, Marina, I forget, what is the name of your law firm again?
Cleary, Jacoby, Alfieri, and Jacobs.
So moved.
Second.
We have a second, Mr. Gibbons. Okay, motion for the mayor, second for Mr. Gibbons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? Okay, congratulations, Marina, you're back.
Thank you. Looking
Marina.
forward to another year.
Our next position is for board planner. I don't believe Mr. Behrens is here this evening, given given our agenda, but Mr. Mayor,
Yes, I would recommend, I would move, Mr. Bearings and his, planning firm, which I'm blanking on right now.
Burgess.
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 Burgess and Associates.
I
Burgess.
second that. I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Mayor and the councilman on a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, congratulations. All right, moving along, we have two new members of the board this evening to be sworn in.
Mr. Caslin, don't we want to do engineer?
Oh, I apologize. I glanced over that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One last position is for the board engineer.
I make a motion for Costa Associates.
Second.
Okay, we have a first from the mayor and a second from Mr. Conigo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Now we can move along to the swearing in of our new board members.
So, Mr. Caslin, if you would permit me.
Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
All right. Mr. Salva and Mr. Gaudier. Joe, I know your camera's not on, but could you unmute?
Yes, yes, Mayor.
Can you, if you're driving, pull over and raise your right hand? Let us know when you've achieved that.
Yes, Mayor.
Good. So both of you, if you can repeat after me, I state your name,
I, Joseph
I,
Cordia,
George Salva,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do
solemnly
solemnly
swear
affirm
and affirm
that I will faithfully,
that I
that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly
and justly
perform all the duties
perform all the duties
of the office of, and stop there.
of the office of
And Joe, you're gonna say class 4 member, and
Class
George,
4 member
good. And George, you're gonna say alternate member number 1
alternate member number 1
of the Borough of River Edge
of the Borough of River Edge,
of the Borough of River Edge
Municipal Land Use Board
Municipal Land Use Board
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and that I will support
and that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear
true
true faith
faith
and
and
allegiance
allegiance
to the same
to the
to the same
and to the government
and to the government
established in the United States
established in the United States
States
and in this state,
and in this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the
people.
people.
So help me God.
So help me
God.
God.
Congratulations to both of you, and thank you for offering
you.
this service to the people of River Edge.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Mayor.
Joe and George, do you wish to say a few words? I normally allow, with your permission, Mr. Caslin.
By all means. Yeah.
George, or if you'd
Joe,
like. to
you can
say
go
a few
first.
words at this time.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for nominating me, and thank you for the rest of the rest of the members of the Land Use Board. I look forward to working with all of you.
Good. George, you don't need to, but if you want to, you can.
Yeah, sure. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Bruce, for nominating me, and great, Mr. Mayor, for meeting with you a few weeks back. And I look forward to working with you and contributing as I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caslin, for that time.
Excellent. Gentlemen, welcome aboard. Look forward to working with you. And in the interim, we've been joined by the newly appointed borough engineer, Mr. Costa. Good evening, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, good evening. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. The board, thank you. And if I do anything wrong, which I probably will, just don't even hesitate to yell at me. But all kidding around, thank you, and thank you. One other thing, tonight, actually, my next door neighbor is coming before the board tonight. So obviously, I'm conflicted out. I'm within 200 feet. But I just want to put on the record as a resident and the adjacent neighbor, I have absolutely no issues with the application and the addition that they're doing. with that, the board, it's in your hands and look at it closely and hopefully you vote in the affirmative, because like I said, I think it's Summit Avenue and I think it's a good addition to the block. And it's probably a hardship because actually he actually lives next door to me, so that's probably one of the hardships he should use as the proof. But other than that, I'm gonna get off. This way, no one can say I did anything. And thank you again, Chairman, and again, everybody on the board, Mayor, thank you, Councilman, thank you very much.
Duly noted. Welcome back. We'll see you.
And Joe, welcome back. Mr. Salva, congratulations. Joe?
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
You too.
You
Thanks.
too.
All right, the formalities out of the way. We'll continue on with our agenda for this evening. The first, for the next item, I should say, is under completeness review. The applicant is Eugene and Angela, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, Gazenput, 830 Summit Avenue, Block 206, Lot 16. Application is for a proposed addition, alteration, and renovation of an existing residence, seeking 4 variances. Proposed improved building coverage, maximum lot coverage. Ms. Styling.
Yes, thank you. So prior to the meeting, I reviewed the proofs submitted by the applicant's attorney and found them to be sufficient for the board to hear the application tonight. I also reviewed the documents submitted with the application. They submitted a complete application form, a survey from October of 2024, a grading plan, and architectural plans. So I think the board has sufficient documentation to review the application tonight.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Depkin, good evening.
Good evening. Yes, Chairman. I find the application complete with the site plan, architectural plans, my zoning review, and feel to move forward.
Okay, thank you, sir. And Mr. Flores.
I think that Rob was going to
Excuse myself,
leave.
right? So yes, correct. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that on the record that it's the belief that since Rob is the owner of the company and he's conflicted out, is also he also
Okay.
brands into us. So that's why I'm gonna excuse myself and just put on the record that there is a conflict.
That's fine.
Uh,
Yeah, we get that on the record. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the board as to completeness of this application? Okay, there being none, I will look for a motion to deem the application complete.
So moved.
Second.
I think I have Mr. Cray on a first, Mr. Gibbons on a second.
Oh, okay, 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Mr. Cray,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Kanigo,
Yes.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Gautier,
Yes.
Councilman Glass,
Yes.
and Mr. Salva.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to continue on now into new business. Applicant is Eugene and Angela Gazenput. Property is 830 Summit Avenue, Block 206, Lot 16. Application seeking variances in connection with an addition, alteration, renovation of an existing residence. Variances for maximum lot coverage, improved building coverage, and height. Believe the applicant has counsel with them this evening. Mr. Capizzi, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to be before you this evening.
Good to have you. You have your client, and who's with you this evening?
We have our civil engineer, Tyler Vandelfalk, our architect, Chris Lopez, and our planner, Catherine Gregory, with us this evening. Before I call my first witness, if I can just give a brief summary of what the application involves, and then we can start with Mr. Vandelfalk to go through the civil engineering components.
Okay, yeah, we'll get everybody sworn in after you've done your presentation in that case. Floor is
Thank you,
yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a project site at 830 Summit Avenue. It's on the easterly side of Summit in the borough's R1 zone. The property is improved with a single-family dwelling that was constructed in 1900 and 1901, thereabout. It sits in substantially the same condition as it did when it was originally constructed, with the exception of a one-story addition that was constructed sometime thereafter that sits on the left or the northerly side of the main portion of the dwelling. Of particular note to the application, in addition to having a 2.5-story and a 1-story component, there's also a detached garage in the right rear corner of the lot, which requires a long driveway along the right side yard in order to gain access to that detached garage. The driveway itself is quite narrow. It doesn't really function as intended. And the last item of note is that the grade of the property drops off substantially as you head from front to back, with Kinderkamack Road being to the east off the rear property line. So the closest property downhill from us is a multifamily development that's actually lower in elevation by about 30 or so feet that Mr. Vandelfark will speak to. What we're proposing to do by way of the application is Eugene and Angela have owned this house for approximately 13 years and reside there with their 3 children and some other people that reside in the home with them. They need some more living space for the family unit as the family grows, and are looking to stay in River Edge for the next 30 or so odd years, obviously continue to stay within the borough for an indefinite period of time. And in order to accommodate the family's needs, we're proposing a 2-story addition along the left side of the dwelling, as well as some amenity space in the rear, is essentially inclusive of a raised patio, with the patio needing to be raised really just to work with the grade. When we initially presented filed the application, we were also providing an at-grade patio, a stair assembly along the left side yard to give access to the basement, as well as a bit of a wider walkway in the front. And in preparation for this evening's hearing, we didn't want to increase the existing impervious surfaces at site. The site essentially has about 3,800 square feet of existing impervious surface. The bulk table doesn't reflect all of that because the ordinance doesn't pick up the portion of the driveway from the front right corner all the way to the detached garage, which is a few hundred square feet or so. But in reality, the amount of impervious surface on the site today is about 3,800 square feet. And we didn't want to exceed that. The initial concept that we filed showed a slight exceedance of that. But in order to not increase the amount of impervious surface at site, we decided to eliminate the at-grade patio, eliminate the stair assembly along the left side yard, and to reduce the width of the walk in the front. This way, even though we are proposing building additions, there's no more additional impervious surface on site in the post-build scenario, and our engineer will speak to that. We have an exhibit that illustrates those minor modifications, both from our engineer and architect. One last update. I understand there was a little uncertainty about who was going to be at tonight's meeting from a professional standpoint, whether it was going to be the board planner, Tom Behrens, or whether it was going to be Mr. Depkin. And Mr. Behrens had called me around 3 o'clock this afternoon while he was reviewing the file in preparation for this evening's hearing. And he had said that we really should be looking at the raised patio a little bit more conservatively and treat it as though it's building coverage. Because the raised patio is part of the foundation of the principal dwelling, he thought it best that we treat that as building coverage, even though it's unroofed, it's open on all sides. Obviously, it's not conditioned or heated. It's not your typical building coverage. But nonetheless, when our engineer speaks, he'll also talk about that adjustment to the building coverage number. Again, was not an intentional omission. The ordinance was recently updated, and I think we're all trying to live with it and understand how the new ordinance should be interpreted. And with that update from Mr. Behrens of this afternoon, Mr. Vandelfark will also have some updated figures relative to that. As with regard to the variances that we need, yes, there is If we look at just the enclosed portion of the building, there's a minor uptick in building coverage of approximately 140 or so square feet. The impervious coverage, as I mentioned, under the modified scenario that we'll discuss this evening, doesn't propose any increase in overall impervious surfaces. And the building height is as a result of the dropping off of the grade as we go from front to back, because the building is getting a little longer. And as the grade drops off as you head towards the rear, when you reset the averaging, that's why we are requiring that building height variance. Just wanted to give the board just a brief explanation as to the project and the basis for the variances, so you can have that in mind when we hear the testimony from the various professionals. If there are no questions of me, Mr. Chairman, I can have Mr. Vanderfork sworn and have him go through the plan set.
Questions from the board for Mr. Capizzi? Okay, there being none, we'll proceed, please.
Thank you.
All right, I'll swear everyone in at this time, and then we can go through the qualifications. So if you please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, and Mr. Lopez, you're on mute.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. And will the applicants be providing testimony as well?
It's not anticipated at this time, but we might as well have them sworn in the event it becomes necessary.
All right, so if you just please raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
All right, and so we'll start with the applicants. Just state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address for the record.
Eugene Gazenput, 830 Summit Avenue, River Edge, New Jersey.
And I'm Angela Gazenput, 830 Summit Avenue, River Edge, New Jersey.
All right, and the engineer?
Tyler Vandervalk, VANDERVALK, business address 64 Valley Road, Butler, New Jersey, 07405.
All right, and Mr. Lopez?
Chris Lopez, LOPEZ. On behalf of Plan Architecture, business address 267 Pascack Road, Township of Washington, New Jersey, 07676.
Thank you. And Ms. Gregory?
Catherine Gregory, Gregory Associates, business address is 96 Linwood Plaza, number 350 in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Capizzi, will you voir dire the witnesses?
Sure. Do you want me to do with them collectively or just as they testify?
We can get everyone taken care of now.
Certainly. Tyler, can you tell us your educational and professional experiences, please?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My license is current and in good standing, and I've been accepted as a witness in this capacity before numerous boards in the state of New Jersey, although not yet before this board.
Is that sufficient, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions from the board as to Mr. Vandervalk's qualifications? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Capizzi. You can proceed.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Lopez, if you can tell us your educational and professional experience as well, please.
Sure. I have a Bachelor's of Architecture degree from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I am a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. My license is in good standing. I have testified before boards in Bergen County, Passaic County, just not in front of this board in River Ridge.
Questions from the board as to Mr. Lopez's qualifications? Okay, thank you. Mr. Capizzi?
Ms. Gregory?
Good evening. I have a Master of Architecture and a Master of Urban Planning from the University of Illinois. I've been a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey since the year of 2000. I've been practicing planning for longer than that. I'm also a municipal planner myself in the borough of Edgewater. I'm also the zoning board planner in Paramus in Fair Lawn. I'm also the housing planner in the borough of Ridgefield, and I've testified throughout the state of New Jersey in my 27 or so year career I have testified in River Edge before, but it's been a number of years since I've been here. So unfortunately, I don't recognize anybody, but and my license is in good standing.
Okay, well, welcome back. Any questions from the board as to Ms. Gregory's qualifications? Okay, Mr. Capizzi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tyler, in my opening, I had mentioned a modified plan set that you prepared. Would you mind bringing that up for discussion? And let's just describe it by title block, preparation and revision date, and then Ms. Stinley, we should probably, I gather we should have that marked.
Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah, so this plan, which we're presenting as an exhibit tonight, is essentially a revised or updated plan from what was previously submitted. And that revision took place up through today, so it's dated January 8th of this year.
All right, so we'll mark that as A1, please. Tyler, this do you also have a plan that shows us the existing conditions at the site?
Yes, I do have the survey available. One moment. Is it sharing the survey or still my last plan?
No, we're seeing the survey.
Okay. Yep. So this is the boundary and topographic survey that the plans were based off of, dated October of 2024.
And that
Thank you.
was previously submitted. Yes. So
I
we
believe so.
don't need to, we
Yes.
don't need to mark that as an exhibit.
Thank you. Tyler, using the survey, can you take us through the existing conditions at the site, please?
Yes, happy to do so. So, as Matt mentioned in his opening, we are located on the easterly side of Summit here. We have the house somewhat centered in the property, left to right. The two-story portion of the home is on the right side, and then the left side is simply one story, and it doesn't have the same depth, but behind that we have a fairly large deck. Access to the site is through a fairly narrow driveway on the southerly side of the house. That extends all the way along the property line until we get behind the house, at which point we deviate from the property line by a couple feet, and we have this rear detached garage, front loading, with a small asphalt area in front of it. As you can imagine, this driveway is tough to navigate. It's only 8 feet between the house and the property line, so quite narrow. And once you get to the rear of the house, of course, a very small area, not much in the way of turnaround space or the ability to park more than a couple vehicles. Besides that, we have the front walkway. The property, from a topographic standpoint, slopes from west to east or from front to rear. It is somewhat not too steep through the house itself, maybe a few feet, and then it drops off severely at the back of the property.
As far as existing drainage, is there anything on site today?
There is not.
Thank you. When we get to your bulk table, if you can just, or while we have this plan here, I had mentioned also in my opening about how a portion of the driveway is not picked up in the coverage table portion of your site plan bulk table. Can you explain that to us?
That's right. So based on the zoning ordinance, driveways that are behind the dwelling do not count towards the impervious requirements when you have a detached garage scenario behind the house. So that portion of the driveway on the bulk table has been excluded. If we go to that, and we'll get to it eventually, but you'll see that we have a total existing lot coverage number of 3,193 square feet. That number, once we include the full driveways, is actually 3,819. So it's approximately 600 feet and change of driveway that's not counted or contemplated under the zoning requirements.
So the total amount of impervious surface at the site today, from a square footage perspective, can you give us that number, please?
Right. So our total hard surface would be 3,819 square feet.
Thank you, Tyler. As far as the proposal, can you walk us through how we're seeking to renovate and expand the dwelling?
Sure. So taking us back to Exhibit A1, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Really what we're doing is, as you mentioned in the opening, the intent here is to maintain the same impervious coverage, although it's non-conforming today, not to go beyond that. And while doing so, to basically condense that impervious coverage into the center of the lot, rather than having so much of it along the right side, right adjacent to the neighbor's property. And I have an exhibit that we'll get to eventually that shows that, depicts that more clearly. As far as the proposal for the site, we're dealing, of course, with the demolition of the detached garage that's in the rear. So this structure will be coming out and that area will be replaced just simply with lawn. And then as we get closer to the property line, we'll have some vegetation planted there for some good screening, as well as demolition of the driveway that runs on the south side of the property. So we are removing that existing concrete apron that's at the front, and removing all the paved driveway alongside of the house and in the front yard. That will be the demolition for the site. What we're proposing is a number of additions. First off, the primary addition will be 2 stories off the rear left-hand corner. This is the northeast corner of the existing structure. The existing deck will be coming out, I should have mentioned as well, and that addition will take place largely over that deck and then somewhat more beyond that towards the rear as well. We will be constructing a 2nd-story addition over the left-hand side of the house where it's only 1 story today. This was just one slight modification on this exhibit because that wasn't labeled on the original submittal, although it was clear in the architecturals. We thought we'd clarify that here. So this area will get a 2nd story over top of it. And then we have a 1-story addition out the front, which is just to provide enough depth in the garage area. And that addition will be compliant to all the setbacks for the zone. Access to the site will now come to this side of the property where we'll have a single width driveway coming in and then widen out to use the double garage doors located at the front of the home. This driveway will be constructed out of a pervious paver, so a paver material that allows for the infiltration of rainwater. So that will eliminate possible runoff of a paved driveway scenario. And we've also used a reduced coverage number of 50% based on that and based on the recommendations of the manufacturer for that block, as well as the new ordinance, which permits that reduction in impervious for the use of pervious pavers. For the front of the house, we'll be reconstructing the front porch, which will be covered. And then we have a couple of stairs down to a 3-foot wide pervious paver walkway. That walkway on your plan as submitted was labeled as 5 feet wide. Again, with the intent to get us back down to the pre-existing coverage number, we've reduced that to 3 feet wide. As we move to the rear of the structure, we have all our mechanicals located on the left-hand side or the northerly side of the house. Those will meet the required setbacks to the property line. We're removing a number of trees on the left-hand side and along the front in order to construct the additions. And then as we get to the rear, we have this raised patio. The intent for this is to have an easy flow between the outdoor living space and the indoor space. So it's just one step down out of the house onto that patio. And because we have the slope of about 5 or 6 feet between the front of the house and the back of the house, that patio ends up being up out of the ground about 7 feet or so as get to the back of the patio. So that's why it's raised and elevated above the grade. And as discussed, we will be amending our numbers to include that as part of building coverage. Although it is not covered, this will be open. It does have this countertop, built-in grill type scenario as part of the patio, but there's no roof over the structure. Then we have stairs that bring us down to grade, and we get into the rear yard, which is relatively flat before we hit the steep slope. You'll notice that we removed the sunken fire pit patio from the rear here, again, just to get us to that pre-existing number. The one other change to note here is that previously we had a stairwell that went down into the basement on the northerly side of the structure. That was removed in favor of a window well. The client actually, realized that they didn't necessarily need stairs there. We could just provide the window well for emergency egress for that basement space. No need to actually access it from the backyard. So that's the layout of the property. From a zoning perspective, we are located in the R1 zone. We have about 10,500 square feet here, where 7,500 is required. We have the required width and frontage exactly at 75 feet, and we have a depth of 138.6 feet, where 100 is required. Again, most of that excess depth over the 100 feet is actually this steep slope area that remains untouched. Excuse me. Setback requirements, as mentioned, we are compliant on our additions. The existing portion of the home is encroaching 1.1 feet, you can see, into the front yard, but the new component by the garage will be meeting the setback. It will not match that encroachment. It will be stepped back to be compliant. We have both a single side yard and combined side yard requirement in the zone. We're meeting those with some space to spare in all cases. And then the rear yard setback, we have plenty there as well. 25 feet required, almost 50 feet provided. Maximum height, as mentioned, we are requesting a variance for the height. The reality is that height in the zoning is measured from our highest peak to the average grade. As we extend this house further to the east or to the rear of the property, because we're dropping a couple of feet in elevation just across this back addition, that's bringing down our average grade around the entire foundation. And therefore, our height is being increased, resulting in the need for a height variance. From a building coverage perspective, the existing structure is non-conforming at 28.6%, and that's inclusive of the deck that is existing today that will be coming out. And the number that we provided on the plan submitted was 29.9%. That does not include the raised patio, which, again, understanding this afternoon, speaking with, I think, the board planner and maybe the zoning officer, was determined that that should be included in the building coverage. So we're going to have to increase that number. It's 328 square feet, which brings our total from the 3148 up to 3476, which is 33% on the nose. So 33.0% from the 29.9. Again, our overall coverage numbers were going to remain the same, but we're going to switch that from just impervious to building coverage, given that it's elevated off the ground. Again, the reasoning for that, if we have to come down the 10 or so steps in order to get the outdoor space, we just don't have that flow between the indoor and outdoor. It makes it very difficult for hosting, et cetera, bringing in and out food, that sort of thing. So the idea is to kind of keep it all on the living level for that reason. Finally, we have our lot coverage, which is our other variance requested as part of this application. Lot coverage, you see, I've split up into two scenarios here. One is excluding yard amenities and one is including yard amenities. And this has to do with the revised ordinance that's supposed to preserve 5% of coverage on the property for side and rear yard amenities. In other words, patios, decks, mechanical equipment, pools, etc. So in order to maintain that 5%, what we're saying is lot coverage excluding those yard amenities is really limited to 30. And then with the yard amenities, we're allowed the full 35. So that's how we come up with these two different line items. And you can see in both conditions, we would be non-conforming. We have 32.7% coverage proposed when we're excluding the yard amenities. So in other words, this variance would be for not maintaining 5% of the lot for yard amenities. Instead, we're preserving 2.3 in this case. So that would be the requested variance. Again, this applicant is building this house for themselves. I understand why that yard amenities has been put into place. Essentially, we've seen it a lot over the last couple of years where we have flippers coming in, maximizing the house, turning around, selling the house, and then the owner says, wait a second, I can't have a patio, I can't have a pool, what's going on? And it's because the flippers took advantage of maximizing the impervious coverage without providing that rear space. In this case, we have an applicant that's building this house for themselves. They're prioritizing the living space over the outdoor space. They see that as a higher priority. And and they're the ones that are living with this. They're not coming back next year asking for a pool, et cetera. So this is really case specific in that the 5% is not being preserved. And then when we look at the total lot coverage, again, the intent here is to maintain the existing coverage. You can see in the table where we're saying 30.3% being increased to 36.2. That's a factor of that portion of the driveway in the existing condition not being counted because it's behind the house. When we consider all hard surfaces, as I mentioned, we're really looking at this number under the lot coverage table, 3,819. And in our proposed condition, we'll be at 3,813. So a very slight decrease. But again, the goal being maintaining the existing hard surfaces on the property. I just want to bring up another exhibit, and maybe we can go ahead and get this one marked. This is essentially a comparison of coverages. So this is entitled Coverage Exhibit, and it is dated also today, January 8th.
We'll mark that as
Right, that will
A2.
be A2.
Thank you. So on the left-hand side, what we have basically is just the base survey, and I've highlighted all the coverage as part of our calculation in red. And then on the right-hand side here, we have this bluish color, and that's representing all the proposed impervious coverage. And as we know from the numbers, we're looking at just a couple square foot reduction. So essentially these are the same, but what we're doing is consolidating it into the center of the lot. So we're taking that coverage that's really hugging the southerly property line, making it impossible to have proper buffering between properties. And also, again, we have an existing non-conforming garage. That garage structure is only 2 feet off the property line, where by ordinance it would need to be 4 feet. So by nature of the application, we're removing that non-conforming condition. I believe we're also, 2-car garages are limited to 450 square feet. This is over that. I think it's maybe 475, so not by much, but again, it's non-conforming in 2 instances. We'll be taking that out. And really this exhibit just highlights the fact that we're taking a lot of impervious off of the property line and really condensing it behind the structure where it has a lesser impact on neighboring properties. When we're talking about impact to neighboring properties, one thing I want to touch on here is the drainage. As mentioned, the existing site doesn't have any dry wells or things of that nature where we're recharging runoff from the roof or from the driveway. In this case, we're implementing a number of features that would mitigate the impervious coverage variance. In this case, well, I should say in most cases, typically what we would do is we design recharge to handle the increase in runoff. So if you have a certain amount of impervious on a site and we're adding more, we're going to recharge that difference. In this case, where we're actually reducing impervious coverage, we typically would say we have no obligation for drainage. But understanding that we are asking for a variance for coverage, we want to take this opportunity and get a bunch of that runoff into the ground to help mitigate any impact to neighboring properties. So we are collecting all the roof runoff from this house and from this structure, and we're going to recharge it in the ground in the backyard. Of note is that if we consider the impervious coverage that's required in the zone and what's being provided, we're talking about 132 square feet different. The storage associated with that 132 square feet would be 160 gallons for a typical design storm. And in this case, rather than the 160 gallons of storage and recharge, we're actually providing 770. So a significant increase just to get that roof water into the ground and make sure it doesn't impact anybody downslope or adjacent to us. So I think that's a huge factor in this application. In addition to that testimony, I have one more exhibit which I'd like to share. This is what I'm calling an aerial overlay exhibit, and it's dated yesterday. You can mark this as A3 maybe.
Yes.
What this does is it takes an aerial image from just from Google Maps, and it provides us a context for the neighborhood and the scale of our project and compared to neighboring properties. Of note is that the properties downhill are commercial and multifamily in nature, so we have significant amounts of coverages between pavements, large buildings, parking lots, etc. We have this wooded slope behind us. That's all going to be maintained as part of this application. The trees that are coming down are largely along the property line on the left-hand side, but the rear vegetation will remain on that slope and that won't be disturbed. We can see the existing garage and pavement. That's all going to be coming out. That hard surface is going to be removed. And what we're left with, this is the footprint of the home as well as the raised patio. The only other impervious on site is that front walkway and driveway, not shown here, but this was really about the scaling of the house itself. And you could see in the neighborhood, while bigger than some of the houses, we also see to the left here some large hardscape improvements to the rear, which we don't have as part of this project. But I think this just gives some good context from a scaling perspective. That really summarizes my testimony. Matt, you have any questions for me?
Nothing further, Tyler. Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to the board if we may, for questions. Let me start with Mr. Gibbons, if I may.
Yes, so I have a few questions. So you spoke about the height. Is the height of the addition higher than what is present on the house?
So from an elevation perspective, the ridge is going to be 6 inches higher than the current ridge. And that's largely a factor of the depth of the house, right? So as we're extending that house back, and probably Chris Lopez will have more to say about this, but that increases the ridge line by 6 inches. So I think we figured 6 inches is due to the ridge line increasing and 7 inches due to the grade decreasing.
So if you're looking at this house straight from the front, it will be higher than it is today.
It will be the ridge line will be 6 inches higher, but that ridge line will be set further back from the street.
Okay. Was there any consideration to have it still level with what is on the site currently? Because I know you're already over, but we're now making it bigger than it is already over.
Mr. Lopez has a response to that when he testifies, but yes, we did consider that, and there is an option available to bring that ridge line down.
Okay, so we can discuss that then. Next, so the basement, and I don't know if this is more for you or maybe this is even for Mr. Depkin. I know we have a bedroom in the basement. Is that correct? I saw that on the plans.
That's correct.
So there's not a walkout in the basement, right? You took out a door that goes to the backyard.
That's correct. There's not a walkout. There would just be emergency egress. Yeah.
Okay. What size window is that? And what is our code? And this again, I think might be for Mr. Depkin. What is our code of having a basement bedroom and the requirements for that egress? And are we meeting that requirement?
That will be checked through the plan review. But the egress window has to be 5 square feet and 44 inches above the finished grade of flooring. But as long as they have an egress window with a window well to access to the exterior, then that will comply with 2 means of egresses out of that bedroom.
And so Mr. Vanderwalk, do we comply with that or?
So Chris is probably a better person to ask that, but it's certainly our intent to comply with that. We're not, and there's no reason we wouldn't be able to.
Okay. And that window would be
excuse me. If there is a bedroom in the basement, they will need to comply.
Yeah, and that can be a condition of any approval, is that the applicant would agree to comply with the borough code and any state building requirements for bedrooms in the basement.
Certainly.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah. Every time I see a basement bedroom, I just get concerned that for obvious reasons that there's egress and, whoever's sleeping in that room is safe.
I agree.
Okay. And then my last thing, I know you talked about this is, owner occupied, owner building with the 5% that we've put aside for backyard amenities. I may be wrong, but I think you're the first people to use that new law, which is great. But I'm concerned that we're on the first application and we're being asked to not comply with our new ordinance. What is the percentage? You're 2.5%? Is that accurate? 2.7, something in that range for the backyard amenities?
We're 2.7 over, so we're leaving 2.3 for the yard amenities.
So my concern is that we just put this ordinance in and we're already gutting it.
Well, the only thing I would say, Mr. Gibbons, is certainly the ordinances are, every land use ordinance is designed to have an exception granted when appropriate. I understand it's new. I understand that there was an intention behind enacting the ordinance. I think here, as Mr. Vanderfalk spoke to earlier during his testimony, my understanding was predominantly enacted to deal with new construction to preserve open space for the ultimate end user. Here, I think a deviation is appropriate given the fact that we lived here for 13 years and obviously that the architecture that Mr. Lopez will speak to momentarily was specifically curtailed to the Gazenput's direction. And so it's our intention to stay here for quite a long period of time. And we recognize the self-imposed limitation that results from the request before the board. And finally, as I'm sure the board is aware, variance grants are not precedential in nature. So whatever you do here is not binding upon the board in any future application.
No, I understand that. I know the intent of, why it was put in. I'm just concerned that the first application we're already not abiding by it. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but I'm just putting it out there. It's just a couple of concerns that I had. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Mr. Craig.
Yeah, Mr. Vanderwalk, when you're doing the calculations on coverage, you're taking the 50% credit on the pervious driveway?
That's correct.
Okay, so when you're saying that the hard surfaces or the coverage is equivalent, you're kind of picking and choosing which code calculation best benefits your argument, because you're including the driveway behind the house, which is not to be included per the code when calculating coverage. But when you're calculating coverage for the new driveway, you're taking the 50% credit. You can't take both. It's got to be one. Either you follow the code in both instances, or you don't. But you can't say I'm going to use the code to calculate the pervious driveway and only have 50% coverage there, but I'm going to ignore the code on the pervious coverage behind the house, and I'm going to pretend that that's part of my coverage.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. And our plans reflect that. I'm not putting on the plan that we have that counts towards our impervious coverage. That's why our existing coverage is the 30.3 and not the 36.2. That being said, from a practical standpoint, that driveway does shed water. That driveway does appear as hard surface when viewed from the neighbor. And so that's where we're trying to compare it from a practical standpoint on why the variance for coverage could be granted, is that physically, the hard coverage is there, even though zoning doesn't count it. So I'm not trying to, deceive the board or anything. That is the case. Certainly that driveway doesn't count from a zoning perspective.
So from the standpoint of code enforcement, when we look at what you're increasing it by, we got to use the real numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah, the approval that we're looking for, yes.
You're trying to make the argument, but you say, well, even though here's what I'm showing you on the coverage chart, but my real argument is I'm going to use the different applications of the code to my advantage. And I just want to make sure that's kind of clear, that you can't really play both ends against the middle.
I hear you. And I think our planner is going to talk about this, but when it comes to variances, a lot of it has to do with intent of the zone plan. And are we, harming that in any way? And that's where I think I'm coming from, is that intentionally zoning ordinances are put in place to keep the impervious coverage to a certain number. The fact that we're not trying to hurt homeowners who have a garage behind their house, so we're excluding some coverage, doesn't change the fact that it's physically there. So I'm just speaking from that perspective.
Okay. And from the standpoint of variances and their applications and kind of the why and the how, this property is an oversized lot. This 10,500 square feet roughly. compared to 7,500, which is required. Awful lot of houses in River Edge are lower than that. And you know, in my mind, that hardship is where the variance comes into play. Someone's on an undersized lot or a small lot or a lot that has strange geometry so that you can't use parts of it. In this case, you know, at 30%, you can get 3,160 square feet of coverage. Okay, on its 10,500 square foot lot, compared to 2,200 on a 75 by 100 lot. It's a 40% difference. You have 40% more coverage available to you than somebody in a typical 75 by 100 lot here. So you've already got, you know, 900 to 1,000 square feet, depending on whether you use the 30 or 35%, more coverage available to you than the typical lot. I have a hard time making an argument that that requires a variance to go even above and beyond that.
Yeah, I think,
don't understand, and before you get into the hardship side of it, the fact that your lot slopes down in the back and you have, you know, maybe less available space there, that means you're packing more coverage into the smaller space and into what looks like a typical lot. So now your excessive or your additional coverage that you have is now being squashed onto a lot that's actually visibly like a typical 75 by 100 lot. You're getting the advantage of that space in coverage, but it's all being put into the smaller parcel or portion of the lot.
Well, I don't
disagree.
disagree with that characterization, Mr. Cray. I mean, not being compacted, we're complying with all the required setbacks. And predominantly the coverage is occurring in the rear yard where it's imperceptible from any passerby on the roadway or from any adjacent property. Again, our property to the north took no issue with the application. The property to the east is 30 feet below us. So yes, there are topographical challenges, but it's not requiring anything to be compacted. Typically, you'd have a garage central to the dwelling. You don't have detached garages are not a common assembly these days. So yes, bringing the garage to the main portion of the dwelling is a component of what we're seeking to do, as well as place additions onto it. And as Mr. Lopez will testify to, when you're seeking to place additions onto an existing dwelling, you look for the logical place to place the addition, depending on where the existing house sits and what spaces are looking to be created. I certainly appreciate your commentary, but you know, perhaps we can have Mr. Lopez go through the floor plan and maybe that discussion will help bring things into perspective.
Matt, I also want to add just that, you know, not all variances are going to be granted because of hardships. I don't think we're trying to make the argument that we have a hardship for coverage in this case. Like you said, the lot is oversized. I think what we're looking at here is a benefit analysis, and that's the fact that we're removing existing nonconformities with the garage, and we're removing hard surface that's immediately along the neighbor's property line, and that's an improvement to the area. That's not an improvement to us. You know, some people try to argue improvements that are really just for themselves. This really is an improvement to the neighborhood. We're getting pavement off the property line. We're controlling runoff in a way that's going to relieve any runoff issues from the neighbors. So there are some good benefits to the application. I think that's where the variance analysis can be approved.
Okay, well, just overall, I mean, you know, Mr. Gibbons' commentary about, you know, kind of coming out of the box with us making variances and then, you know, having a variance of this size on a lot of this size, I find it difficult to convince myself that it's justified.
Understood, Mr. Cray. If we can, you know, have the benefit of presenting at least our architect, and then we'll go from, you know, hear from the balance of the board members on Mr. Vanderfalk's testimony, and then hear from our next witness.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
I have to be honest with you, much of what Mr. Cray said is what I'm already thinking. the discussion about the 5% that we wanted to save for the rear yard is not an objective idea, but a subjective idea. It's dependent upon keeping the property to 30%, maximum lot coverage 30%, and we were giving the 5%, not to give a 5% difference between maximum lot coverage excluding yard amenities and maximum coverage inside. So we're looking for the maximum lot coverage to be 30%. I agree with Mr. Cray and with and in previous discussions that this is an oversized lot, and so the benefit extends, multiplies with the size larger than standard, and so I don't see grounds for granting the lot coverage variances. I see grounds for granting the maximum height. I do understand the benefit of maintaining the coverage. I get that argument, but I just don't see why we as a board, other than the request is being made, I wonder if the residents couldn't simply reduce the size of the improvement and therefore not require a variance except for the maximum height, which I think would be something I could easily vote for, because I think it's unfair for them to be penalized by simply the slope in the yard. So these are my thoughts, that I'm not yet convinced that there is cause for the maximum building coverage, the maximum lot coverage with and without the amenities, but mostly the maximum lot coverage with and without the amenities. So I look forward to hearing something that would convince me. We have an obligation, the Land Use Board, to find substantive reason for granting variances other than the request being made. Thank you.
Yes, and we do have a planner coming up whose primary objective is to prove and validate the variances. So I did get into it a little bit here, but my testimony is largely engineering.
Okay, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me ask a question. I'm sorry if I missed this. The new elevated deck or patio, what can you describe the construction, the proposed construction? What will the floor, the surface be?
Let's leave that to Chris if you don't mind. He's going to cover that in detail.
Okay, I'm asking because it ties into my understanding of the lot coverage calculations with respect to permeability. So is it a permeable surface or an impermeable surface? That's the question.
Yeah, that is not intended to be permeable.
Well, Tyler, you didn't take any credit for that. It's not that it's not intended. It's not permeable.
Correct.
So that might be something to think about, guys.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, Councilman. What with regard to?
I think he's suggesting we could reduce our coverage if we went to a permeable paver on the raised patio.
Correct.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer that.
It would. It comes from a construction standpoint. That's where it gets a little tricky, right? Because you'd have to let water in it, and it's 7 feet off the ground. So where's that water going? But it could be possible. It's something I would have to review with Chris.
So it's not an elevated deck on piles. It's on earth.
Well, I think they're basically building extensions of the foundation walls, and then it's probably infilled with like DGA or something. Yeah.
Okay. I understand the prior comments, but I just want to say that for what it's worth, I have no bias with respect to the proposed variances in relationship to the lot size. I just want to go on record saying that. Final question. If I understand correctly, recent revisions were made, so you had to adjust your calculations related to lot coverage, right? When were those revisions made and when were they submitted to the borough?
Yeah, so there were a couple different things. One was the applicant and, us as a team decided that we wanted to come in without increasing the physical coverage. Again, zoning versus physical aside. And so we did changes like removing the rear patio, which was at grade, and reducing the front walk, things like that.
I just want to know the time.
Yeah, this was a few days ago. And then today is when we learned, about 3 o'clock today is when we learned about that raised patio being counted as building coverage, not just lot coverage. So that was today. So that's why we're presenting these as exhibits. It wasn't actually filed with the board.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no further comments or questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman, thank you. Mr. Pfeffer.
Thank you. A lot of the questions and comments that were already made were the same that I would make, so I'm not going to repeat them. I will say that for the witnesses who are still to testify, I would hope to hear, on the one hand, yes, the justification for the variance, but also whether there's any wiggle room there, because I definitely concur that this board has struggled a lot to come up with a formula that would be a more standard approach to these type of situations in terms of the lot coverage and the percentage of lot coverage. And so, I share Mr. Gibbons's concern and reticence about right away being asked to, and this is not criticism of yours, it's not your fault, but to be almost immediately being asked to make exceptions to a rule that we thought would prevent a lot of people coming to the board and asking for exceptions. So here we are again. So that's what I would encourage the next witnesses to focus on, not just justifying the variance, but also giving us some guidance as to whether you're open to scenarios that would remove the necessity to go beyond the extra 5%. So that's my general comment. I do have a couple of quick, what I think will be easy questions for Mr. Vandervalk. The first is, there was a mention of tree removal along the side. And by the way, I will also say that there's a lot in this proposal that I do like. I like the consolidation approach. I like the additional drainage that's going to be put in. So this is not just to slam the proposal. There is a lot in it that I think is good and helpful, but we may need some tweaks to it. So as far as the tree removal, do you have a figure in terms of how many trees are there now and how many trees would have to be removed?
As part of the application, we're proposing to remove 9 trees. 3 of those are sort of in front of the house, and the remainder's along the side. And then there's a number of trees in the rear. I don't have them counted, but it looks like it's probably over 10, maybe close to 15 that are remaining.
So would it be fair to say that all the trees along the side of the house that right now sort of are on the border between the two properties, that all those trees are going to be removed?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, we'll just leave it at that. I just wanted a factual answer, so you gave that to me. I appreciate it. The removal of the garage, is there any plan, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but is there any plan to construct a new garage?
Well, the garage is moving to the main house. So where we see our front driveway, that's leading to a 2-car garage right off the front of the house.
Okay. Okay, but that's a new construction, right? Because you're
Well-
demolishing the one in the back.
Correct. We're demolishing the one in the back, and then the left side of the house, existing home, which is just one story, that's essentially being converted to a garage as part of the renovation and addition.
I see. Okay. And in the, well, actually, I did have a question about the tree removal. So that strip where the trees are being removed along the side of the house, is that just being replaced with earth, with, you know, some sort of, what kind of surface is going to be there after the trees are removed?
Yeah. We didn't put together a landscape plan. Typically, and most commonly on these projects, I see owners line that property line with evergreens just as a visual buffer. But like I said, there hasn't been a landscape plan put together as part of this. But it would be landscaped in some way.
Okay, so you're not anticipating pavers or?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Which leads me now to the other side of the house where the long driveway was, and that's being removed. Is that the same expected scenario where you can have landscaping and some sort of soft surface there?
Yep. That would be a combination of lawn and landscaping, yes.
Okay. Just a couple of more. Yeah, just a quick question on the patio. Do I understand your testimony correctly that beneath the patio, as it's anticipated now, it's just going to be a solid extension of the foundation? That's going to be, it's just going to be solid material, whether it's concrete or something else underneath the patio?
Well, the walls around the perimeter would be like an extension of the foundation of the home, is my understanding. But then you would just infill beneath the patio, either with, you know, fill material from when you dug the excavation for the addition, or stone, or some combination of the both. Again, Chris is probably the better person to answer this as the architect, but that's my anticipation.
Okay, so I would just raise it now as a question for Chris to answer later on at the appropriate time, as to whether something that would allow an open space beneath the patio so that there could be some drainage through the patio, whether that's something that is feasible. That can be answered later on at the appropriate time. And I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Mr. Kanigo.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been asked and answered so far. I'm going to keep my comments to later, although I have exactly the same concerns as everybody. I just want a simple clarification on something, because something Mr. Vandervalk said confused me. Are you claiming a hardship?
Well, the variances in this case, I believe the height has a hardship component.
Mr. Vanderforp, Catherine Gregory, our planner, will address that, sir. It's a combination of a C1 and a C2 case, sir, but our planner will testify to that when the time is appropriate.
That's fine. Earlier, he testified on the record that you were not claiming a hardship. That's why I'm asking for clarification, but I'll wait.
With regard to the height variance, the topography a lot is contributing to that, so that would qualify as a C1 basis. And then the balance of the variances are being justified under a C2 basis, that being that the granting of the variance would foster some of the purposes of zoning that Ms. Gregory will speak to.
All right, so you'll let us know when the time comes which one is a hardship and which one is not.
Correct.
All right. That's all for now. I'll wait until everybody else testifies. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Godier.
Thank you. I just have one question. You mentioned that in the revisions, the walkway was reduced in size. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, is the walkway permeable? Is it pavers or semi-permeable?
It's permeable pavers, so we're using a 50% on the walkway as well.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Salva.
Yes, I don't have any questions, just listening. I do agree with Mr. Pfeffer that if there's a way that there can be some modifications made while addressing the concerns of the board, that would be hopefully we can work something out.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Capizzi, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could have a moment just to have 2 or 3 minute recess just to talk to my client if that's possible?
Sure, we could do that. Time now is 8:50 PM. Let's reconvene at 8:55. I'll look for a motion to,
So
for
So
recess.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? All right, we'll be back at 8:55.
Thank you.
Okay, if everyone can come back online. Call the meeting to order. It's 8:55 PM. Ms. Steinle?
Yes, I'm just going to call the roll. Mr. Mayor,
Here,
Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Mr. Cray,
Here.
Mr. Gibbons,
Here.
Mr. Knigo,
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer,
Here.
Mr. Gautier,
Here.
Councilman Glass,
Here.
and Mr. Salva.
Here.
All right, all members are present.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Steinle. Mr. Kabizzi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we'd like to do is have Mr. Lopez testify as to the architecture plans, hear the balance of the board's thoughts on the architecture plans. Certainly, we appreciate the board has some concerns relative to what we've already heard relative to the civil engineering testimony, but we'd like to get the full input of the board on the design documents. And then once we complete the question and answer period for Mr. Lopez, carry the matter to a later date so we can see what we can do to make some adjustments, to see what we can do to respond to some of the concerns. So I just want to let the board know what our thought was as far as moving forward, and continue on with Mr. Lopez.
I find that proposal acceptable. Any objections from the board? Okay, Mr. Capizzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lopez, if you can bring up your plan set, please.
Sure. Can you all see my screen?
We can, and so
Okay.
this is the plan set that you revised just to match the hardscape modifications that Mr. Vandelfork just testified to?
That's correct. Two changes I made was to eliminate the basement stair walkout on the left north side of the property of the house, and then the lower patio at grade below on the east side of the house.
And this revised plan set is prepared as of and revised as of what dates?
Today, 1/8.
Thank you. So this would be 8/4, I believe.
Yes, and this is just one sheet, or are all the sheets, have all the sheets been revised?
Just the two sheets, the proposed basement floor plan and the proposed first floor plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Chris, the sheet numbers that were revised as today, if you can just give us the sheet numbers as opposed to just the title.
Absolutely. VA .300 and VA .400.
Thank you. So Chris, if you can tell us a little bit about the existing house and some of the shortcomings with the existing dwelling and what we're trying to achieve by way of the renovation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Chris Lopez. I have had the pleasure of working with Eugene and Angela Gazenput since August of 2003. In between now and then, I've worn many hats: marriage counselor, financial advisor, arm wrestling referee. But I'm happy just to wear my architecture one for this evening. They have been in town since 2012. They are looking to stay in town. They're very stapled in the community. They have 3 young kids. One is a teenager about to start driving, hence the driveway and garage discussions. And we really wanted to make this their forever home, a home that they can envision bringing their grandbabies home to. With that being said, the first we obviously wanted to do was address the site. Right now, you can't quite see it because there are some overgrown trees here. There is this 1-story addition on the left side, the north side, if you will, which both Tyler and Matt have mentioned. This was an addition done after the original house was built in the early 1900s. It's not built very properly. It's not insulated properly. It's not very functional for them. So we obviously wanted to address that. And then again, as everyone has mentioned, this narrow driveway and into this detached garage in the back, which is not functional whatsoever. So naturally, we wanted to create a forward-facing garage, conventional with the neighborhood in the context. Go to a center hall colonial, if you will, But before we do that, I just wanted to again call out the sort of lopsided nature of this mass, although you can't see behind the tree in the front and both the back. As you look from this view, you know, there are lots of cantilevers. It's not very appealing, aesthetically pleasing. So these were a couple of the things that they wanted to address on the outside. As you go in through the inside, first floor, front door orientation remains the same. This is their foyer. Again, this right side of the house was the original house, just this portion. There was a kitchen addition at one point, and then this left great room addition. So foyer, there's a fireplace in it. Again, not functional, not really suitable. Dining room, powder room. Upstairs, there are 4 bedrooms, although this one, we call it the Harry Potter room. The youngest son gets stuck in here, the poor boy. So obviously, this is a very antiquated house layout. It's antiquated in both number of rooms, size of spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So we needed to address that. We wanted to address the site, the topography, and obviously do something that's not too bold. So we put forth the design that captures a functional garage, larger spaces for the family to gather. They do host holidays, dining room that can be extended into the corridor, family room, larger kitchen, you know, pantry. This is the guest suite on the first floor. You know, mudroom amenities. Like I said, they have 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 daughter, teenage daughter, and then going upstairs. Again, so 4 bedrooms here, nice size. All 3 children are excelling in school. They are bilingual. They have tutors. So an area for desk and homework and musical instrument practice was very important to them for their children. Both Eugene and Angela are hybrid scheduled, work from home, so an office component was important to them as well. And just to touch on a couple of the things that the board has brought up as I go back to the basement here. So these 2 windows for the basement guest bedroom would be egress. This is the area for the window well. The existing basement, if I can go back a couple sheets, again, with 3 young kids, there is no room for winter recreation here. The ceiling heights in this existing basement are very low. They're about 6'4". So even I'm hitting my head in the light fixtures, if you will. So that was also something that they really wanted to address. In doing so, we've created a conventional laundry room in the basement, and then a larger rec room, which ultimately had the walkout, but we changed to the window. With that being said, to talk about the patio, I'll flip to the renderings if we can. So this is the sort of back, let's call this the southeast view. Once again, this is the patio that was removed just yesterday. This patio, this open patio, is intended to be a wet laid stone, whether it be limestone or bluestone. I did kick around with my colleagues here in the office, the permeable pavers up here. To Tyler's point, bringing drainage in below this, around the perimeter of the house where we do have existing basement. It's something we would like to avoid if at all possible, just on a waterproofing, feasibility, construction standpoint. But you can see we're trying to maintain as much of the existing home as possible. As you see the existing cantilever here. And ultimately, in dealing with the topography and dealing with the site characteristics, we wanted to have this house present itself to the community, to the neighborhood, in a way that it's concise, it's compact, and it's got the vernacular, the context of River Edge, right? With the stucco finishes, as the original house probably once did. The beautiful thing about Summit Ave and all of River Edge is there's a lot of beautiful homes, a lot of different materials. So it gave us a nice blank canvas, if you will, but in keeping with the true context of the original home, this is sort of where we landed.
Chris, as far as the objective of creating balance here now, when we look at the property from the street under its existing condition, we have a 2.5-story element flanked by a 1-story element, and you had described that as somewhat lopsided. Can you tell us how that's essentially we're cleaning up the streetscape and providing a more desirable visual environment by virtue of what is under the proposed elevation?
Correct, yeah, again, you can't quite see it because the overgrown trees here, but this is the existing two-story with the walk-up attic. This one-story portion, we didn't really feel comfortable with adding on to it, being that it was built in a certain way. So in order to make this more geometrically pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, oops, I'm sorry. Wrong button. We brought this second story addition over what is the existing one story, which is now the garage, in a fashion that makes this more not so much symmetrical, but more concise, more balanced.
I gather you've had the opportunity to visit Summit Avenue and get familiar with the various housing types on the block?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us your opinion from an architectural perspective about how this home will sit on the site as compared to other homes on Summit Avenue?
Sure, absolutely. As you address it from the front, it's not any larger or wider than obviously the permitted side yard setbacks, but also of the adjacent houses. The house on the left has a similar configuration, garage on the left-hand side, two-story across the whole entire front. They're actually, I feel like a touch forward to the street from us. House on the right is obviously we know of, is also very nice, similar fashion, similar size. Most of the houses on this street on Summit Ave are equal to or are larger in front facade, if you will, than our property here. To address the question about trees being removed, obviously we don't. Go ahead, sorry.
If we can stay with me for a minute, Chris. As far as the increase in the ridge, can you point out to the board on your rendering where that's occurring?
Sure. So the existing ceiling heights are to be maintained from the existing portion into the new portion. That ridge increase occurs here. We like conventional, no less than a 4-on-12 roof pitch. On an asphalt shingle, so that's what we've maintained here. That's what brought us above the 6 inches above the existing ridge. We can certainly look to accommodate that request to lower that ridge, but it would just mean a little atypical construction methods, but it is achievable if the board so requests.
As far as the ceiling heights of the first floor and second floor, can you tell us what they are specifically?
Again, because this house was built in the early 1900s, they're anything but normal, if you will. We've got an 8'8" ceiling height on the existing first floor, which we are going to match throughout the entire first floor. We've got an 8'4" ceiling height on the second floor, again, which we are to match on the second floor as well. So they're standard, if you will, but just go ahead.
Chris, if you were going to compare the existing ceiling heights as they're going to be carried through to the additions versus what the ceiling heights would be in new construction, how do these ceiling heights compare?
Far less. Lots of houses we're doing right now have 10-foot ceilings on the first and 9 on the second. You end up with flat roofs, no pitched roofs, low pitched roofs, and that's not the architecture that we wanted to achieve here.
So the height variance isn't driven by having a request from the client to have generous ceiling heights here.
It is not.
As far as the 2-story addition in the rear that we know we can see when you go to the rear yard rendering, but staying with the front elevation, if you can zoom in on that for us, the component of the 2-story rear addition as well as the raised patio, any of those elements visible from the street?
No. No.
As far as again going to the raised patio, Tyler had talked about the desire to try to keep the raised patio on plane with the finished first floor elevation of the first floor.
Correct.
Can you delve into that for us a little bit?
Absolutely. So I'll flip back to the floor plan just for a minute here on the proposed. We typically do not try to have, because of the grade change, the drastic slope and topography of the site. It would be 7 or 8 steps out of this door from the kitchen to grill, to entertain, just to get anything to this outdoor kitchen from here or there. So as far as a safety standpoint, a flow standpoint, it's the most logical and safest sense to have this patio just 6 inches below the first floor height, and maintaining the flow of the home and obviously the amenities that are out there.
We have some other quasi outdoor amenity space that's contributing towards the building coverage in the rear yard. Is that correct? Centrally located there?
Correct. Yep. This is what we've dubbed it as a four-season room, not heated, not cooled, exterior space. This is one large overhead door. You can catch a glimpse of it here in this rendering. So this would open up into this patio for their holidays, for their parties, for their children's birthday parties, entertaining purposes. That is the function of that space. Again, we're showing these as windows per se, but this is a true. I know I'm flipping back and forth on you, and I apologize for that. This is a true covered outdoor space.
Can you take us back to the rendering, Chris?
Absolutely.
And if you can describe what's occurring on top of that and how that's accessed?
Correct. So this is a covered terrace over that four-season room, accessed from the primary bedroom. This by nature was, in order to maintain windows in these rooms with this roof, we didn't want to have this roof pitch on top of here. It did not look proper, so we decided to add this covered terrace accessible from the primary bedroom, so they can look out into their wooded area, into their wooded yard.
And Chris, just in closing, as far as the facade materials that you've selected and how that is in keeping with what we see in the neighborhood.
Yeah, once again, the existing home, we believe, was to either be stucco or stucco and brick. We're looking to maintain that. Angela and Eugene, they both really love this aesthetic, and it is sort of the vernacular of old style river edge, and we were happy to honor that.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Capizzi. We turn to the board now for questions. Mr. Canigo, can I start with you?
I mean, I just don't see how that fits into the neighborhood. I've walked that street maybe 1,000 times. And this doesn't look like anything that's on that street, so I'm not crazy about it. I don't think that some of our questions from before have been answered, but I'll let everybody else jump in. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Pfeffer.
Just one question about the extended patio. Is there drainage on that patio? And if so, where does the water drain off to?
So we would handle this one of two ways. Probably it would obviously pitch down to where there's an opening, but we would also put not weep holes, but pockets for drainage to come off as the water sheds 1/4 inch foot away from the house.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's basically runoff.
Scupper, yeah, into the yard.
Okay, that was my only question for now. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for this presentation. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councilman.
Just a couple of minor things. I recognize I think we were told before the elevation of the ridge line is literally increasing only 6 inches, right? So there's really no line of sight concerns with respect to neighbors or other types of line of sight issues.
Can you respond to that, Chris?
That's correct. Yeah.
This isn't going to interfere with or obstruct anyone's line of sight to anything.
It is not. No, we have a hip roof on both sides. We don't have gable roofs that are coming out with a peak, even though we are meeting the side yard setback. Because we are increasing the height, we put a hip roof on each side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just a note, I mean, several times tonight I heard that there was access issues to the existing garage because the driveway is so narrow, close to the existing property line. But now I'm seeing 2 very narrow garage doors. So just a comment, you might want to reconsider that. Everyone drives these big SUVs now. I see these garage doors like this all over River Edge and no one can ever get into their garage. So maybe think about putting a single garage door that allows access to the garage, especially because there's not that much driveway here. And you might want to be able to use the garage to put the cars in. Just a thought there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Godier.
Thank you. No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you. So I appreciate the explanation on the roof. I guess I'm just not, this rendering just makes it look to me that the right side is taller than the left side, but I guess it's really just my eyes playing tricks on me. Is that really the case here?
So it's essentially one ridge height. If you look at the elevation on the last sheet, the second to last sheet rather, you can see that we've matched this ridge across. But again, as it falls back away from the street, as far as visibility goes, all of these ridges do meet halfway through the house from front to back.
So they're not the tallest part of the house.
They are not. They are not.
Okay. They just look like it from this vantage point, I guess.
Correct. You can see it comes back, like there's a ridge here that goes back and this ridge goes back and they all die into the main roof of the house.
Okay. I'm just looking at that. It just looks like it's, a lot bigger.
Sure.
So were there backup plans or, I guess there may have to be, but to make this compliant, because this is, looking at the numbers, we're talking about a 7,000 square foot house. I know that includes the basement, which, usually isn't included, but this is a very large house. And it may be similar to other houses in town, but it's a very large house. Have there been any conversations of trimming this down to make it fit into 35%?
We will be discussing that.
Because I think that's a concern. Looks beautiful. Looks very nice. I'm sure it'll come out great. But it's a lot of house on an oversized lot. And I think we heard that from a few other people on the board already. It's a lot of house. Gorgeous, but it's a lot of house. So that's just my comment.
Thank you.
That's all.
Chris, you're on mute.
Mr. Craig.
I have no additional questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. Salvo.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
Tyler?
Chairman, I did have a question. So underneath the patio, since right now it's raised 7 feet or so, is there an intention to put a room or crawl space under there?
There is not. That would just be on fill.
And what are there proposed utilities to that patio? It said that it's going to be an outdoor kitchen.
There would be gas and electric, and obviously sanitary lines coming from the basement back towards the amenities on the outdoor kitchen.
Okay.
But that would all come from inside the house.
All right. And I think those are all my questions right now. Thank you.
One question I have for you, Mr. Lopez, the fireplace, it looks like you have a chimney extending in the back there. Is that a gas fireplace or wood fireplace?
This is gas, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Capizzi, I think that wraps it for our questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there may be a member of the public that's in attendance that may wish to comment now, and so we can potentially avoid them having to come back at a subsequent meeting, if that's okay to have that person speak at this time. It's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Steinle, do we have anybody in the public?
Yeah, we do have one attendee in there raising their hand, so.
Okay. All right, well, at this time, let's we can certainly open it to public commentary only on the testimony for architecture and engineering. So with that, I'll look for a motion to open to the public.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilman. There's a second, Mr. Gibbons, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstained. At this time, we're now open to the public for questions on the testimony that's been heard this evening. I think we have one person with a hand raised. Would you? go
Yes,
ahead?
so if you please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, John Minacchio, 824 Summit Ave, River Edge, New Jersey.
All right.
Good evening.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Sure. MANOCCHIO.
Thank you.
And to full disclosure, we're the Gazenputz neighbors on the right side of the house, so the southbound side. And just to put it out on the record, we're completely in support of the plan that they've proposed. Their existing driveway butts up against our property line, so obviously they'd be removing that, and we'd get some relief there. And otherwise, in terms of runoff, we have no issues currently, and their driveway obviously is impermeable, so I'm not concerned with that. And I did want to respond, there were a few comments made, I think one by the mayor with respect to, why would you give this variance just because they're asking? I think the reason I would, support it is when the Gazenputz were originally contemplating this, they were considering moving out of town, and when they said that they were going to stay in town, we were thrilled. They've been here for 13 years. We've been their neighbors the entire time. They have 3 kids in the school system that are the same age as our kids. So, I think these are exactly the type of people that you would want to grant these variances for, frankly. There was another comment with respect to, this house doesn't fit within Summit. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. We've lived in Summit for 15 years. I think the one great thing about Summit is, there is no distinct house on Summit. Every house has its own character. We live in a Dutch colonial. There might be 2 other Dutch colonials. There's several Center Hall colonials. There's all different types. There's Tudors. So I think they're preserving the character of their house, and they're fitting very nicely with the rest of the houses. So we wholeheartedly support this variance and the proposal in its entirety.
Okay. Thank you for your commentary this evening.
Thank you.
And Ms. Donnelly, I don't think we have anybody else left in the public. So at this time, I'll look for a motion to close to the public.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstained? We're now closed to the public. Time now is 9:23. I know we have a 9:30 curfew, so Mr. Capizzi,
If we can carry the application, Mr. Chairman, I believe there are 2 meetings that you have in February. If we can have if you wouldn't mind just reminding me as to what the second meeting date is in February, and if we can carry the application to that date without further notice.
so I'm going to turn first to our land use clerk, Mr. Alter, and ask you for the available dates.
The first date is February 12th. The second is February 26th. February 12th already has an application on it. February 26th is wide open.
If we can be placed on the February 26th agenda, please.
Okay.
And if we can carry that without further notice, and certainly the applicant grants the board an extension of time as necessary up to and including February 27th.
Mr. Castellan, I would make that motion.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second.
We have the mayor on the first and Mr. Gaudier on the second.
And we can take a voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain. Okay. Ms. Donnelly, if you'll do the necessaries as to the announcements on the
Yes. All right, so the application for 830 Summit Avenue, Block 206, Lot 16 will be carried to the board's February 26, 2025 meeting without further notice.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll see you then.
Thank you, Mr. Capizzi.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too. We have reached the end of our agenda for this evening. There's No further comments on the board. I'll look for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Kadiego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gaudier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstained? We stand adjourned at 9:26 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Good
Have a
night,
great
everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.